because I want to pick up on this. Right now we've got Dr. Abdullah Yusuf with us on the line. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Welcome to the Drive Time Show. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm good. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you very much. You are obviously a senior lecturer in politics and international relations at the University of Dundee. So that means that you are going to be able to tell us exactly what is going on and why the United Nations at the moment seems like something, like we said, out of the Avengers, like a movie. It sounds really cool. It sounds amazing. It's supposed to be there to protect civilians, humans. They might as well wear capes while they're at it. But what exactly is going on? We are going to be asking you about that, but we also do acknowledge the fact that the UN is actually really important beyond the fact that it's been doing World Food Programs, humanitarian aid, peacekeeping missions all around the world. It's all been happening. But historically, before we do go into what's going on right now, what has the impact of the UN been over the past? What can we learn from what they've done in the past?
Normally I take 3 months to run this module.
Oh, really? You've got 20 minutes. I mean.
So I'll try my best.
Yeah.
Try to be non-academic as well.
I feel like we're privileged right now. Like yes. you're like a professor, and we're getting all this information for free. Yeah. So okay. Let's listen to this.
I'm quite happy to spend time on that.
Thank you.
So basically, it's to do it like international relations. The way the international relations work is the world system. The world system we're talking about is actually anarchic. It means there is no 911 in the system.
Okay.
So it means if a state is in trouble, if they call 911, there's hardly anyone to pick up the phone. It depends.
Okay.
Who are you going to call?
If Somalia calls, there's hardly any chance anyone will pick up the phone. But if Japan calls, there's a good chance someone will pick up the phone.
Ah.
So that's the anarchic system. So it means there is no supreme authority on the top.
Okay.
Unlike in a domestic politics, even if you don't pay TV license, there's a good chance you can end up in a jail. But in the international system, because of the anarchic system,
right,
that means any country can get away with huge amount of carnage, destruction, anything.
Is that what we've seen
that's
though?
The problem. Sorry?
Is that what we've seen in the past? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So, but the problem is, it's not the UN, it's the countries, the sovereign states, 193 countries.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you started with 1648, Treaty of Westphalia,
mm-hmm.
So the way it works, each time system has got the stress, this anarchic system, and if the stress is too much, it can collapse. And if it collapses, the rule is always that there is a better chance to have some kind of regulation in the system. So if you see the history, Congress of Vienna after Napoleonic War, so during the Napoleon's time, he invaded 22 countries. Okay, so that's a serious stress in the system. So what it did, it made the system collapse.
Okay.
And then each time it collapses, there is a good chance we have a better regulation.
Right.
So after Napoleonic War, we got something called concert system. So that's better than the previous Treaty of Westphalia. And that took us another 100 years. And then 1914, 15. So that's First World War.
Wow.
So that 100 years created so much stress in the system. At one point, it was too much.
Got it.
And then we ended up with First World War.
So what sorry to cut you off. What you're trying to say almost is that we have the United Nations today, but this is almost a kind of evolutionary anthropic product, which has basically come born out of entropy, where something starts, it gets destroyed, it's reborn again, better, stronger.
Yep. Yeah.
But my the way you're phrasing it, it's before you had wars with sticks and stones, then you had guns, and they created gunpowder. Now then you had bombs, and you had aeroplanes. Now we have nuclear bombs. It's do we have a chance after this to come back?
So that's the problem, isn't it? So after the League of Nations, we got some better version than the League of Nations, which is the United Nations.
So version 2.
So the problem is, the way the system works, if there's too much stress, the system can collapse. But the problem is what you are saying, because of the nuclear weapons we have on the system now, So, there's
Yeah.
too much stress will actually destroy the whole thing.
It's not going to stress it. It's going to just like chuck it into non. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So,
Okay, so that's
yeah.
that's also important because it brings that question about, then if the system collapses, then it's not actually good for the countries, even like for the USA, Russia, or the big powerful countries, because then there'll be nothing there
Yeah.
to rule or to do anything. So what's the use of that?
Exactly.
So the way we see it, the state's actually rational actor. So the states try to be rational.
Okay.
So if you think that, like even if you see like lately with the Gaza situation, like USA for the first time, more or less abstained for their
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah.
So it means like they're worried about, they're creating too much stress in
I
the
see.
system.
I see.
Okay, so does it make sense?
I got
so
it.
like for the stress management, the big powerful countries have to also cooperate. If
Yeah.
they don't cooperate, then the whole system can be gone. So which will not be good for anyone.
Okay. I get what you mean. So there is a concern around the stress of the system, which is why maybe some countries which previously were not saying something, they are now. But my question really is this: that hypothetically speaking, this system is now in place. This system is now a learned system. It's a trialed system. It's learned over time, almost like AI. It's learned from its mistakes.
Yeah.
But you said, US has come out and, even they kind of abstained now. In a hypothetical idyllic situation where all of the countries in the UN unite against a country or a place where they say, hey, this is happening, this is wrong. And they outright say it, because right now, all across the world, here in the UK, you've got record-breaking numbers of protests calling for ceasefire. People are coming out in the streets, ceasefire, protest. There's so much emphasis on it. And why? Because they want the UN to say unitedly, stop this. Okay, so let's imagine that all of that gets done. All of the protests, they make an effect. It was all worth it. All the countries eventually say, great, let's come together. Let's say, stop this. And then, if let's say if it's Israel in question right now, they go ahead and they say, "Oh, we don't care. We're not going to listen to you anyway." So what's the whole point of it?
But again, the problem is if you look at international relations point of view, states actually care about their prestige as well.
Okay.
So even for Israel, they need actually some kind of support from the world community, because if they don't do it, because then what's the use of being a state? Because the state is all about internal recognition and external recognition. So if a state doesn't have any external recognition, so that will make the state.
So do you think that with the United Nations, the only thing that the United Nations might end up doing to an oppressive state is saying, we're not going to deal with it anymore? Or will they do something more than that? Will they escalate the situation? Are there any measures in place? Are there any protocols? Or is it just a matter of basically pressure tactics and cutting off trade, cutting off relations?
But again, like the things I mentioned about, there's no 911. So if Israel has got a good friend like USA, there's hardly any chance you can do actually much in that system.
That's the thing, isn't it?
But at the same time, USA has to be careful as well, because, by doing that, they might create too much stress.
Right.
In
and there's
the
no return.
subsystem in the Middle East. And if it is too much in the Middle East, then it will not be good for anyone.
Okay, so Professor, you've spoken about the fact that there is a stress point, and then that's when we learn. And we've mentioned kind of a little bit that perhaps this time around, we can't take that chance for that stress level to rise and for a possible nuclear war to break out, because there is no return. Do you think that then warrants for a reform to happen now before a stress level rises? And if yes, what on earth can we even do?
Okay. In terms of reform, if you look at even just after UN being created in 1945, because the whole thing was created with the consensus of the Second World War.
Right.
Because the countries were actually fighting together against Nazi Germany and Japan.
Got it.
So, but the problem is once the war is over, Cold War kicked in. So that means the consensus just gone out of the window. So the things that, we'll work together in terms of, in a united form. Once the Cold War started, the whole thing is misplaced. So that means like your enemy is my friend, or it's like, you can interchange always.
It's all mixed up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like historically, they try to do some changes. Even like when Kofi Annan was in power in 1997 onward, he had this like serious vision about the future reform.
Okay.
But the problem is, at the end of the day, I mean, who will do the reform? So the 5 permanent members, they're quite, if you talk about the current 5 permanent members, and if you compare them with like Ottoman Empire, because Ottoman Empire just collapsed, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's why they're not in the system at all. But with these 5 members since 1945, they're quite actually stable.
Okay.
They're quite powerful. They have got nuclear weapons. So, I mean, I'm not seeing any kind of problem in like P5 members. So like what Kofi Annan proposed, like instead of like, not touching the P5 members, but touch like other things, like, have like more membership, like, more permanent members, but without the veto power. Because if you ask for veto power for other members,
Right.
that means these 5 countries will put a veto on that. So that means then the whole thing will be gone. So
Okay,
it's for their own interest, they will not allow it
Okay.
to happen.
It's good that you mentioned vetoes, because my colleague Fahim
Yep.
was on about it with me as well before. Tell us about this as well, because obviously there's pros and cons to the idea of a veto. Is the veto system currently working in favor of the UN? I think I should put it like that. Is it working in favor of the principles of the UN as it stands today?
I mean, again, like, so the world system is not ideal.
Yes, it's not.
It's an anarchic system. So if you see like after Second World War, between 1945 and 1960, there are like 83 vetoes in the UN by the Soviet Union. You see. So once the decolonization things happened in 1960s, when like lots of new countries came along in the system, then suddenly USA started putting veto, not the Soviet Union.
Got it.
So that's the problem, isn't it? So, in terms of the veto, I think this is one of the area. I think it's necessary as well, because the system management. If you don't have the power, then you can create so much stress in the system.
Fair enough. Collapse. Okay. Where do you see that we could? Obviously, that's a massive pro of it. That it does bring stability. It brings that.
Yeah.
What can we see with the UN going forward now? What do we see?
So like in terms of UN, like, I mean, if you do all kind of bad rap against UN, but UN has been doing pretty solid work in terms of international law. If you talk about climate politics, if you talk about human rights things, they have been gearing up.
Yeah, we spoke about that. Yeah.
Like, I mean, sometimes I ask my students, like, just like tell them that, can anyone tell me like how many international law UK so far signed? And more or less, no one even like close. UK actually signed 14,000 international law.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So did you see? So more international law means it's better for the system, because that means, this anarchic system is still like wild beast. We have to, contain it. So the international laws are very good. And UN has been working on that for years. And like the more and more international laws are coming every single day. So that means the countries will be much more constrained to do whatever they want to do. So like, for example, like Israel, you can see like why the genocide, why the starving people are so important, because these are serious like war crimes. So if you do that, that means like someone has to do something about that. So that's why Israel has to be very careful that so that it cannot be decided that it's actually a war crime. So that means then the countries are actually obliged legally by international law to do something about that.
So with Palestine, do you think that it's something that will be recognized by the UN? Like, do you think it'll ever become a member?
I mean, that's like more like.
I know it's further down the line. There's a lot of other issues going on, but is it something that would that could potentially happen? Is that an ideal thing to happen? What are your thoughts?
In terms of if you talk about the ideal world, I mean, that makes sense, isn't it? We call it like self-determination for people. So every people has the right to like have a self-determination. And if a community of people decide that they want a state, then UN is supposed to facilitate those things, and that happened historically. But at the same time, the problem is the external recognition is also important. So the external recognition means all the countries, 193 countries, have to say yes, especially the P5 countries. So if one country says that, oh no, I don't like this idea that Palestine will be a sovereign state with full power, full sovereignty, full military, and all kind of things, then that will happen. So if you look at the example of Kosovo, Kosovo actually proclaimed their statehood in 1999. So this is 2024, because Kosovo is still not a state because Russia actually did not like this idea, because Russia's friend is Serbia, and Serbia doesn't like that idea. So even one single country, especially P5 countries, if they put a veto, then the ideal situation will not work out.
I mean,
as an ideal situation.
With this veto, with this whole veto situation, you just yourself mentioned the fact as well that countries need to be really careful how they tread their steps, so that they don't end up basically shooting themselves in the foot, whether it's to do with the fact that they will not be recognized, they won't have the prestige, whatever. But isn't that kind of contradictory in the sense that Israel so far has been pretty brazen in the way that they've been doing things, all the while they know that there's an investigation going on within the ICC and the J, but they seem to be carrying on. So how are they so confident, basically, is the question, when the UN is there?
Again, it's 911 problem. If a country knows that they've got some really powerful, good friends, they've got nothing to worry about. But here is a catch. I think your colleague mentioned about all the protest marches happening around the world, especially in the Western world, because that's really important. Because what we call it's Athenian problem. Athenian problem means during the Greek city-state Athens, during that time, Athens was a city-state, but it's also an empire in that setting.
Right.
But also Athens was democracy. So that means it has democracy, but also it has got this empire mentality.
Okay.
So how to reconcile these two things? So if you compare this with the USA, so whatever USA does, since it's a democracy, that means it has to actually convince its people whatever they do. So even if you see when they invaded Iraq in 2003, they got the support from the public, because that's the Athenian problem being solved. So if millions of people on the street, and then they ask the government, then you've got to stop this, then it will be stopped. That's the way Vietnam War stopped. It's not the Vietnam War stopped because America lost it, because it's the social cost. The public decided that it doesn't make any sense.
That almost sounds like, well, we created the UN, but then the people have got to do it anyway. The people have got to fix the problem anyway. Yeah. But what I'm trying to think is,
so I think the protest is really important. So if something happens in terms of,
that's something definitely people can do. But I'm just thinking with terms of the UN, what can they do? Because I know you're coming at this from a really realistic perspective, and that's what you're trying to do. You're not trying to bring in a false story.
No.
But with everything that's going on, you have this sort of the veto powers in place. You have, and the way you've explained it to me, at least who is a layman, what it sounds like is a UN, which from the top of it, from the fairy tale side of things, is there to protect peace. But what it sounds like to me, time and time again, from what you've been telling me with the data and everything that you have, and it is what it is, by the way, it is what it is, that it's there to protect the interest of the 5 states. It's not there to protect peace. It's there to protect their interests. And whatever peace is, whatever peace means, whatever peace is going to be contextual to whatever their values and whatever their objectives are.
Yeah.
Again, there's a problem with this, core issue, which I've been talking.
Yes.
All along, this anarchic system. If you look at another example, in during the Cold War in 1986. Nicaragua actually took USA to court, World Court.
Okay.
And because America was doing lots of bad stuff in Nicaragua.
Okay.
And Nicaragua actually won that case.
Oh, really? And then what happened?
And ICJ asked USA during that time to pay, I think, close to $2 billion.
Oh, really? Have they done it?
Like, what do you think?
Oh, what's the point then? That's what I'm saying. What's the point of all
So
of this?
pointless.
If the ICC and
It's just a
the
bunch of
ICJ
paperwork,
and the
isn't it?
UN, if they can get everyone united and be like, "Hey, Mr. A, stop doing this," and then Mr. A goes, "Nah," then what's the point of any of this, really? That's what my question is.
But again, the problem is like, if USA does it again and again, that's not good, because that will create precedents for other countries.
Okay, so basically what we're trying to say is that Israel can bomb Palestine, but they should be careful about when they do it next time, basically. So, I mean, that's just obviously, it's a bit, I can't say that I'm a bit concerned after hearing all of this.
Yeah.
In the sense that there doesn't seem like a clear route forward.
But at the same time, I mean, again, like what I talked about, stress management. And big powerful countries have to be careful to maintain the system's stress management. If it is too much stress, it's not good for them either.
Okay, so do you think we're getting there?
So you can see so the countries are actually restrained how much they can do.
Okay.
So there's a limit there.
If only
that's the good news. So that means
slightly good news.
There is hope.
But they haven't even stopped since the killing of other nationals.
Well, that happened last week, didn't it?
So
they've apologized.
Yeah, we didn't mean to. It's just it seems like it's
sorry, Abdullah. Just what we're trying to say is like, where will it, for these powers, for the ones that have veto, what will it be in your personal, let's say, experience, in your insight, in just kind of what you think? Where is this stress point going to end? Because we're talking about tens of thousands of people that have already been killed, and we don't have to go into all of that right now, but everybody is aware of what's happening. Fahim just mentioned about foreign nationals that were killed there for aid. And is it always just going to be a case of, oh, they said sorry, so it's okay. They said sorry, it's an apology, it's an apology. Oh, you know what? This is how they say.
They didn't mean to.
They didn't look. They're looking at it this way. They're looking at it that way. Is it always going to be given the benefit of the doubt, or will this stress level on the point of Israel's side, is there even going to be a threshold to this? Or will it just keep on going?
I mean, again, the stress is, so far, it looks like it's very contained. You can see there's not much escalation from Iran or Hezbollah or other things. These are more restrained reaction.
That's another topic, to be honest. But there is.
So it means what I see from my IR perspective, that the big powerful countries are actually very careful what they're doing there. So it's not like the countries are not talking to each other. US is obviously talking to Iran. US is obviously talking to other countries. So behind the scene, lots of diplomacy is going on. But at the same time, you can see it's like one of those things. The states are rational actors. They want to do something to actually set a some kind of lesson. We'll do this. Wow. So if you look at the war on terror, I mean, that cost USA $8.3 trillion. But what did they achieve? Achieved nothing, absolutely nothing. They killed more than 1 million people. But in terms of, did you see, the problem is the big powerful countries have got serious firepower they can do. But at the same time, if they do it continuously, and if they do it indiscriminately for some time, then there is a risk for too much stress, and then we can end up with Great War, the Second World War. And if it is a Great War, that means everyone is in. No one can escape that.
So the combination of this entire conversation pretty much has been, everybody needs to go to Sainsbury's and buy bags of rice, baked beans, possibly a nuclear shelter, and just hope for the best.
Start digging in the backyard.
No, I mean, if there's a nuclear, that kind of thing, that's the end, I'm afraid.
So we better try our best. Like you said, though, Abdullah, Professor, the public opinion does count a lot. So everybody that's out there trying their best to make their voices heard, it's not going in vain. And at the very least, we will stand on the right side of history. Professor Abdullah Yusuf, Doctor, Senior Lecturer in Politics and International Relations, and an all-round very clever person. Thank you very much for coming on to the show and giving us the insight. So peace be upon you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Fahim, that was excellent. Really, really, food for thought.